If you met him in the final years of his life, you would have thought you were looking at a ghost. You would see a frail, paper-thin old man handing out shiny dimes to children on the street, preaching about God, temperance, and charity. He wanted you to believe he was a saint. But behind those hollow, ancient eyes lay a mind that had single-handedly strangled the American dream. This man didn't just build a business. He constructed a machine designed to consume everything in its path. At his peak, he amassed a fortune that, adjusted for inflation, would sit near $400 billion. That is 3 times more than Jeff Bezos, 4 times more than Bill Gates. He was the first billionaire in human history. But every single dollar in that vault was soaked in the wreckage of the men he destroyed. His name was John D. Rockefeller. And before he was the philanthropist who built libraries and cured diseases, he was the most terrifying predator the modern world had ever seen. This isn't a story about success. This is a story about a monopoly so powerful, the government had to rewrite the very laws of capitalism just to kill it. To understand the monster, you have to look at the man who made him. John wasn't born into royalty. He was born in 1839 in the backwoods of New York to a mother who was a saint and a father the neighbors literally called Devil Bill. William Devil Bill Rockefeller was a traveling con artist, a tall, charismatic sociopath who drifted from town to town, selling miracle elixirs to cure cancer. These elixirs were nothing but useless mixtures of crude oil and laxatives. Bill would roll into town, charm the women, swindle the men, and vanish with their savings before the sun came up. While Bill was out living a double life, he actually secretly married a second woman while still married to John's mother. Young John was at home, starving for stability. He watched his mother struggle. He learned early that the world was chaotic, cruel, and unpredictable. But then, Devil Bill would return home, and he didn't hug his son, he trained him. Bill once bragged to a friend, "I cheat my boys every chance I get. I want to make them sharp." Imagine that, your own father swindling you out of your pocket money just to teach you that trust is a weakness. This trauma didn't break John, it calcified him. He decided that if the world was chaos, he would be order. He began keeping a ledger, tracking every single penny he earned, saved, or spent. He wasn't just saving money, he was hoarding control. By the time he landed in Cleveland, Ohio, the Civil War was raging. But John didn't pick up a rifle. He paid a substitute soldier to fight in his place. He had a different war to fight, a war for oil. In the 1860s, the oil industry was the Wild West. It was dirty, volatile, and crowded. Anyone with a few $100s could build a shack and refine kerosene. The market was flooded with competitors. Prices were crashing. To most businessmen, this was a disaster. To Rockefeller, it was an opportunity. In 1870, he formed Standard Oil. His goal wasn't to compete with the other refineries in Cleveland. His goal was to make them disappear. He approached them one by one, but he didn't come with threats or violence. He came with a smile and a ledger. Picture the scene. Rockefeller walks into a rival's office. He is calm, polite, dressed in a pristine black suit. He opens his book and shows the competitor exactly how much money they are losing. He knows their costs better than they do. Then he makes an offer. He offers to buy their refinery for a fair price, cash, or Standard Oil stock. If they said yes, they became rich. If they said no, Rockefeller would simply nod, close his book, and say, "God bless you." And then the nightmare would begin. The men who refused him thought they could fight. They thought business was a free market. They didn't realize the game was rigged before they even woke up that morning. Within weeks, these holdouts found that the world had turned against them. They couldn't buy barrels. They couldn't book trains to ship their oil. Their costs tripled overnight, while Rockefeller's prices dropped to pennies. They were bleeding cash, watching their life's work dissolve in front of their eyes. Panic set in. They would run back to Rockefeller, begging to sell, but this time, the offer was different. "I'm sorry," John would say, his voice devoid of emotion. "The price has gone down." He would offer them scrap value, pennies on the dollar, and they had no choice but to take it. He didn't just beat them, he erased them. But how was he doing it? How was he choking them out without breaking a sweat? The secret was in the rails. Rockefeller knew that oil was useless if you couldn't move it, and in 1872, the railroads were desperate for steady volume. Rockefeller went to the railroad bosses, the Vanderbilts, the Goods, and made a deal that remains one of the most corrupt conspiracies in American history. It was called the South Improvement Company. Here is how it worked. Because Rockefeller shipped so much oil, he demanded a massive discount, a rebate, but that wasn't enough. He also demanded a drawback. This is the part that is hard to believe. Every time a competitor shipped a barrel of oil on the railroad, the railroad secretly took a portion of that competitor's fee and gave it to Rockefeller. Let that sink in. If you were a rival trying to compete with John D. Rockefeller, you were literally paying him to put you out of business. Every barrel you sold made him richer. You were funding your own execution. It was diabolical, it was genius, and it was totally secret. But he didn't stop there. Rockefeller built a network of industrial spies that would make the CIA jealous. He bribed railroad clerks to give him manifests. He knew exactly where his competitors were shipping, who they were selling to, and for how much. If a rival refiner secured a customer in New York, a Standard Oil agent would show up at that customer's door the very next day. They would undercut the price by 50%, take the loss for a month just to steal the client, and drive the rival into bankruptcy. In 1872, in an event known as the Cleveland Massacre, Rockefeller absorbed 22 of his 26 competitors in less than 4 months. The small independent businesses didn't just fade away, they were swallowed whole. Standard Oil became the Octopus, a creature with tentacles wrapped around every pipe, every track, and every barrel in America. By the time the public realized what was happening, it was too late. The price of kerosene was dictated by one man, the warmth in your home, the light in your lamp. It all belonged to him. By 1880, John D. Rockefeller controlled 90% of the oil refined in the United States. He was richer than the wildest dreams of emperors and kings. He had brought order to the chaos. He had achieved his father's dream of being the sharpest man in the room, and he had done it with a Bible in one hand and a sledgehammer in the other. But as his wealth grew, so did the hatred. The American public began to see him not as a businessman, but as a tyrant. Political cartoons depicted him as a giant, slimy cephalopod, strangling the Capitol building, crushing workers, and poisoning democracy. He was the most hated man in America. He had to keep a loaded revolver on his bedside table. Rockefeller thought he had won. He thought the war was over because he owned the battlefield. But the violence was just beginning. Because when you corner the market, you also corner the desperate men who work for you. And as the 20th century dawned, the miners and the workers were done begging. They were ready to fight back. John D. Rockefeller had bought the world, but in our next episode, we'll see what happens when the world decides to burn it down. From the Ludlow Massacre to the breakup of the empire, the blood is about to spill.